Well, hello there, YouTube. Laguna Bardwell back here for a PS4 playthrough. Now, I know previously I did a live stream of Bloodborne a little bit. It's going to be a little bit different today. I'm going to play around with the sliders, and then I'm going to make a second video kind of starting off as a solo run. Because when I played with, the username was The Good Hunter before. I think they changed it now. They kind of ran through the entire thing, and I didn't really get a chance to explore. And that's part of what I want to do today is kind of clarify the slider system a little bit and then do some exploration on my own, if that makes sense. A lot of people have kind of mentioned on Reddit and stuff as well that they've been having trouble with the character sliders, and that's kind of why I want to get into it. But we're going to hit the play online button. Just 1 second there. And we'll see how this goes. But mostly I don't find a big problem with creating characters in this game. It's not as bad as it was with like Oblivion or Morrowind, for example. Those were just terrible unless you had the Red's Heads mods.
Well, you've come to the right place. Yharnam is the home of blood administration. You need only unravel its mystery.
I also skipped a lot of this before.
But there's an outsider like yourself to begin.
Gee, I wonder where I should begin.
Easy, with a bit of Yharnam
I can
blood
be
of your
whoever I
own.
want to be.
But first, you'll need a contract.
So, when it comes to character creation in this game, I guess I always go with female characters, so that's what I'm starting off with. There's a couple of things you want to keep in mind right off the bat. The first one is well, I always go with a younger age character. I always pick wasted skin so I can level up how I want to. That's entirely up to you. There's nothing wrong with that side of things. When you pick a character, I find that a lot of the feminine look, if you really want to make a character that looks realistic, pump the head scale all the way up. Everything else is kind of fine in the middle, but I usually crank it all the way down just because, you know. Maybe put the chest just like a couple of notches up. Just so that way you have kind of a more uniform look. As you can see, her head kind of looks a little weird right now. The standard isn't really the best way to do in this game. So we're going to go right into the face details first. Now, I always kind of crank the emphasis down to a weak emphasis on my characters. And I always make her as young as possible just because when you go aged with it, Bloodborne tends to make them look really jaundiced and, you know, sickly almost. So that's why I tend to stick with a younger looking character. I mean, if you go like somewhere around there, it's not too bad. But you can still kind of see the beginning stages of the jaundice side of things. And then facial aesthetic. If you go really masculine, she kind of looks like Nicolas Cage. I'm sorry. That actually looks like Nicolas Cage. From an artistic perspective, sorry, I can't look at that. Nobody is 100% masculine and 100% feminine. Even me, for myself, I've got kind of smoother features right now. Nobody's got that kind of a jaw except for, well, Nicolas Cage. But even if you crank it all the way up, it kind of bulges out the cheeks a little bit. But it's not the best way to kind of make a character is by cranking it to something to max. So I tend to kind of push the... You kind of notice it's more in the cheekbones, actually, with the whole masculine and feminine. Usually kind of around the 185, it starts to look a little better because, like, for some reason this game takes feminine and it makes it look slightly more blue. So if you look at, like, right here on her right, our left cheek, you can kind of see there's, like, a blue tinge right there. When you crank that down, the masculine side of it kind of looks more reddish yellow. You're going to try to want to keep it around the like 80% up on the bar, or if you want to go with the masculine look, try to get it down like around there. It'll look better when we get to the other sliders, just a heads up. But I tend to keep with this rough estimate. Now, the fun part about this, actually this did pretty much for me, is you want to start your character off everything on 128. And I'm just going to speed through this as you'll understand when I get to it. Nose ridge, 128, 128, 128, 128, 128, 128, 128, 128's cool. We're getting there already. Because if you look at her face, it's kind of slowly averaging out. And you don't want to kind of, like... I don't even know if this word is allowed on YouTube, but you don't want to, like, pussyfoot around it and kind of go, like, oh, maybe I'll 127, maybe I'll, like, 130, 131. 128 is, like, it's your halfway mark. So you're going to get the most average-looking character by doing this. And this is going to be your starting point for making any character in a Souls game, essentially. And there's, you'll kind of understand as we go through this a little bit more in terms of how a character should be created, as opposed to what the game actually kind of gives you. 28. 128. Fingers are getting tired already. Should not have played guitar before this. Cool. So this is the 128 character. If you look there, you kind of see that the... I'm going to try to turn to the side for this. But there's a fall-off radius from your nose to your chin. On her, when she first started, it was kind of like back like this, rather than straight down. So that's been fixed up a little bit because we're averaging out all of these statistics. I don't know what the hell that artifacting is on her neck. It kind of looks like the editable area is not the same as... Like, you can kind of see that line where it starts to amend itself. And what the hell is up with the thick necks in this game? Seriously. But anyway, I digress. So, the very first thing that I always do with a character is I work on pupils. Make them big so that way it doesn't look kind of like narrow eyes. Because if you look at it here, this looks like a yandere, like narrow eyes, like... You don't want that on your character unless that's the look you're looking for. And it's kind of the same for like the medium eye tone. You can see like a little bit too much of the white of the eye. So usually I go with the third option on that side of things. Color pupils we'll come back to at some point. Tattoos, it's up to you if you want to have scars or whatever. But thing is, you can only have one at a time. And for me personally, I like the freckles. Because when a character has like a really flat texture to the face, you can tell that she's a character rather than a living, breathing... Okay, I know she is a character, not a living, breathing organism, but like the illusion of being alive. You kind of want to give extra beauty marks and textures wherever possible, just so that way she looks more accurate. So my tattoo, I tend to put it at about like a 70-40-40 split. Maybe 70-40-30. The reason being is because freckles and stuff like that, you want to make sure it's as brown as possible. You don't want to go with like a purple scar or a green scar unless you want to like look like you're made of fucking chlorophyll or something. And the Adam Sandler movies from my past make me want to scream, chlorophyll, more like borophyll, am I right? You know. But I'll show you what I kind of mean by that when I... So if we take this scar and we were to... Actually, yeah, it's this one. Say we crank the scar right up. Ugh, we don't want that over the lip. That's just kind of weird. But say we crank the scar up so it's like this size. Right? And then you crank the green all the way up, and you crank some blue in... Oh, okay, not that much blue. It's kind of hard to get the color that I'm trying to talk about on this. But... like this, for example, it kind of just looks stupid. maybe I shouldn't use the word stupid to describe it, because that's apparently ableist according to some people. But when you're trying to go for like a darker green, it kind of looks like you're seeping, well, green, which isn't realistic. So if you want to make a realistic character, go with a realistic tone, essentially. So if you crank your red all the way up, even that is just a little too red, so you kind of want to turn that down a little bit, maybe neutralize it with a couple of other... like that. Just something so that way it's not pure red. And the same goes for eye color. I'm going to get into that in a moment as well. That being said, we're going to go back to the freckles, and we're going to stick with that 70, 40, 30 split. For now. Maybe a little 40, yeah. So, thing with the tattoos in this game, or freckles, or scars, or whatever, it never really works, unless you really fudge with it. So for example, if you have no rotation, why is the freckle here? Like, why isn't it here in the middle? So you kind of have to rotate it. Usually kind of a 20 is kind of enough. But it's still upside down a little bit. Best I can think of is to go... Actually, that's pretty good. Whee! That's fun. 0 or max on that one. But even still, the position is kind of off to the side, so you gotta center it, if you know what I mean. Now that being said, though, you kind of want to put a little bit of a twist on it, because if you can see really closely on the screen here, you got your bottom freckle starting here on this side and ending up here on the other side. So you kind of want to just nudge that bar just a little bit, just to kind of center it. Something around a 3 is fine on my side of things. Maybe yours is a little bit different. Maybe a 2. Alright. So already, she kind of looks more like a character because she's got those kind of freckles and skin marks. Whereas if you have like a flat color, not the best. So, tattoo is done. Now, when you go to the face shape, for any of you who have ever done animation, there's kind of a thing called box modeling. And you kind of start it with a cube and you kind of define your shape by making edges and kind of pulling them back, make more edges, pull them back, until eventually you get a face shape and they can like sculpt out of it. Well, kind of a similar thing with here. You want to make sure that your characters... I mean, this looks decent as it is right now. But you want to make sure that your characters got a decent overall structure. So for example here, when you look at her jaw, the contour itself is... This game does a terrible job of saying what the contour actually is. But essentially, if you were to trace this chin bone here all the way back, the contour is this part right here, the center part. And the concave, or sorry, the thin versus thick, is where it goes up and concave or bulging down. So it's actually the curvature of how this works. It's not it's more concave convex, not thin versus thick, because thick kind of feels like it works this way rather than this way. That being said, usually kind of somewhere in the middle is fine. You don't want to go too overboard with it, because it's going to look incredibly deflated. So usually for me, I'll keep that around like 150 to 170. Something like that's decent enough. Same kind of thing with the lower jaw. The lower you get this... Remember I pointed out earlier about how the jaw kind of disappears into the neck a little bit? In terms of the texture, because you gotta see the color difference. It's the same thing with this. If you higher the jaw, it actually pushes what would be a goiter if you had one down into the neck and kind of causes the artifacting like this. And it's the same thing if you go too high up. You kind of see like a little bit of a pinch underneath. So you kind of want to... you want to have a decent range, but you don't want it to be too high or too low. Then when you move to the front, you get the regular old jaw width. That's pretty self-explanatory on that side. Do you want to have a quagmire jaw, or do you want to have like no jaw at all? It's perfectly fine whatever you decide on that. It's your character. And the jaw protrusion, again, I pointed out earlier how the character kind of has this, almost like no chin. Jaw protrusion is basically your chin size from front to back. It's not the width, but it's the depth of the chin. So usually I try to keep that relatively in line just to make sure it doesn't stick out too much like a sore thumb, but you also have a realistic-ish looking chin. So something like that is pretty good. Now we get to what's called the chin. Hooray. So, chin width is the actual chin itself, now that we're finally at that stage. It's honestly not that bad when you look at it, because a regular chin, you kind of have a little bit of, I guess, volume is the best word. But I mean, having a narrow chin versus a thick chin, it's basically going to make you look like you got stung by a bunch of wasps, or, you know, this happens. If you see that little line right there, if you really pump up the chin to max, you get this kind of weird lip on the chin where it's like, it's like a texture seam. So usually you want to keep it high, but not too high if you want a narrow chin, whereas if you want a wider chin, just go for it. You do you. It's not my forte, or not my style, I should say. Something like around there is fine. Chin height, it's kind of the same thing here. It removes the chin entirely, but in an upward direction rather than front to back. Yeah, something like that, I guess. Maybe like 100. It doesn't affect it too much if you're off by a couple on this one. Chin size, that's... Honestly, the chin size I think is fine with her. Maybe go like in the middle, just so you're not completely averaging out any statistic at any given time. She's starting to look a little better already, though. So chin protrusion. This is... Oddly enough, it's also the up to down, but instead of the bone length from here to here, it's more like how pointy the chin is, if that makes sense. So you can kind of round it off and give her like almost no chin, or you can crank it up and give her like a cone head chin, if that makes sense. But I mean, chin protrusion is not really something you need to worry too much about. I personally just put it a little bit lower, just to give it a kind of a rounder face. That's all I really care about my characters, is to make them aesthetically appealing to me. And it's entirely up to you if you want to like fuck the character up entirely. But chin length, honestly, I don't really find that needs to be amended at this point. Because if you're at the point where you're happy with the chin length as it is, like, it's not going to really matter. But from the side, I try to keep a nice rounded chin, kind of like what most people have. That way I'm not, you know, making her look like she's a glass jaw, if that makes sense. Somewhere around the 95 should be fine. And chin tip position, front to back. That'll kind of change that overall angle as well. And you don't want to... Honestly, if you want a regular looking chin, don't even edit that. It's not worth editing that one. So we're getting somewhere already. Mouth. Now, this mouth looks fine. But when it comes to human anatomy, you want to make sure that your corners of your lips are in line with your pupils. Well, as I poke my own eyeball. Fuck. Because... Actually, I like the way her lips look already. That's actually pretty good. But essentially, there's kind of like a magic ratio for the face. It's kind of like the whole 5-7-5, I think it was. But basically, you can divide the face into like 3 parts here. It's 5 from side to side, so you have like left of each eye, the eyes themselves, and then between the eyes. So there's like a 5 here, I forget what the 575 method was now. But that'll kind of be more so posted on the blog when I get into further detail about this. Essentially, though, when you're looking at this, if your pupils and your corners of your mouth are in line, don't even bother editing that. Mouth to chin distance, you can kind of change a little bit. Basically, that's just going to kind of pull that bottom lip a little bit bigger or smaller, depending. And as you can tell, it kind of squashes the lip a little bit as well. But honestly, 128... I'm kind of fine with 128 on mine. So it's not too bad. But bear in mind as well, your bottom lip typically would have a little bit more volume than your top lip. Typically. Just by a little smidge. So try and keep it a little bit on the shorter side, so that way your bottom lip gets a little bit elongated. Mouth width. Again, you want to make sure that you keep things in line with the pupils as possible with the mouth. So if you go really fucking wide with this, no. Just no. Honestly, I think her mouth is perfectly fine. Maybe a little bit narrower is okay, but never go beyond the corners of the eyes, because then she's just, ooh, you know. We'll kind of put that as like a in the middle for the purposes of this character. We'll give her a smaller mouth. Yeah. We'll do a little bit there. Again, mouth position up versus down. That's not really... It's not actually mouth position, and this bothers me with the sliders. This actually kind of shortens this bit of skin here, and kind of extends the lip up and down on the upper lip. And yes, it kind of purses that a little bit as well. So if you do end up going, say with like a really upward lip, you're going to want to widen the mouth as well, just to make it more accurate. But for me, mouth position it was kind of fine as it was, the 128. Maybe I'll put it down a cup, like just a little bit. There. Occlusion, again, we're going to want to go back to the side view to look at this one. This is more your front to back on the mouth. And it also kind of affects the fall-off radius from the lip to the chin and here. So I guess you kind of can see it as like a protrusion forward and backward, but it's not really that. It's more of the angles of the skin around it, if that makes sense. And again, if you have something that you think looks fine already, just keep it neutral. Don't worry too much about this. At this point, you're kind of refining the overall shape of the face to something that's more your style. Mouth slant. Honestly, I don't really see much of a difference for using this. It kind of changes whether your top lip goes above the bottom lip or not. Or hangs over, I should say. But honestly, I don't really screw around with that one. It's not too bad. This, though, you don't want to screw around with this at all. Unless you want a really flat-faced character that kind of looks like she's going to stick up her arse. Or, you know, Angelina Jolie lips, if you know what I mean. So again, don't kind of fuck around with what's... The rule of thumb, if you have this, start average. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. That's kind of the overall motto going through here. Now, the lips are something that I don't like about this. I hate this part of it. Because if you go with an open versus pursed, yes, it gives you a bit of like the lemon face if you go toward the pursed side. Or a sour face, I should say. Just kind of like, I hate life. Like kind of like emo streak. But if you go to the open side of things, it actually kind of sizes the lips up. So it's kind of one of those things, like, yeah, you can kind of purse it a little bit, but if you want to get a little bit of volume to your lips and like the thickness of them, don't use lip shape as an example at all. Just ignore it, leave it alone. Same with the mouth expression. Happy kind of like really plumps up and widens her mouth, which isn't the best. Same thing as well. Sad kind of just makes her look a little too puckery. I'm actually fine with that one as it is too. Now, if you really want to make somebody smile and frown, For some reason, lip size is actually the one for that. So if you want her to smile while she's killing things in a bloody massacre, just put your lip size all the way to large. And it, for some reason, doesn't actually affect the size of the lips. Who'd have thought? But yeah, I don't like the whole smiling, and I don't like the whole sad look. I kind of a neutral, melancholic look is what I usually go for. Lip protrusion, if you go back to the side view, you're going to see that this is kind of more this again. And it does kind of change how sour she looks as well. Again, keeping that relatively neutral is okay. Just kind of toy around with the neutral area a little bit to find what works for you. Same thing with lip thickness, but this one is actually the one that does control the size. So as you can see, it's like Nicki Minaj lips and, you know, kind of a spinster telling you to not make noise in the library look. It's entirely up to you if you want to kind of amend that, but for good, decent-looking lips, this is probably your best bet. Cheeks, I have a hit and a miss with the cheeks. I don't mind the overall cheek layout in this game, but it's just, if you look at this from 3/4 front, this is a decent fall-off radius. But as soon as you take the cheek thickness and you change that anywhere other than neutral, it kind of makes her look, like right there, you can see the defined cheeks to the point where she looks almost skeletal. And if you go down just a little bit, it kind of plumps out her cheeks, so she looks more childlike. Which, again, if you're going for that kind of character, good on you. Deal with it as you will. Just bear in mind as well that when you kind of pump out your cheeks, it's going to pull the lips with it as well, so you're going to have to go back to the lips to edit accordingly. Whee. So that doesn't look too bad, just being a little bit other. Except what I don't like is this part right here, because that's just a little too protrusive. And even if you concave the cheeks, she still has those cheekbones, so it's not the best looking look. So we'll keep that as it was. The cheekbone width. This is where the problem lies for me. How do you have cheekbone width low and cheekbone width high? It should be narrow and wide, for starters. But the second part of it is, like, the low versus high, it actually takes the height, depth, and width it's a misnomer in this game. You want the height to be whatever you're comfortable with. If you kind of push the cheekbone height up, it shortens the eyelids, so it makes your character have really small eyes. Same thing as well if you have low cheekbones, it really makes your character have wide freaking doe eyes. So yeah, if you want a doe-eyed character, there you go. Just crank your cheekbone height all the way down and make her look unnatural. Which I don't mind some of it sometimes. It's not my favorite thing to look at, but you kind of want to feel your own face when you're doing this, and just feel like, oh, I have this much. Try and like mimic it on her face. So I got pretty low cheekbones. Rather than up here, it's like down here. I'm okay with this as it is. Cheekbone depth isn't actually depth. It's how bulbed your cheekbones actually are. So you had to kind of go to 3/4 front, and you can kind of see it pull up the face a little bit as well. You just want to make sure that's as natural as possible, if possible. So cheekbone width, usually I edit that 1/3, and I just kind of make it go in line with the rest of the face, just to make sure it's as uniform as possible. Nostrils, I really don't know why the nasal size is a part of this game. Like, yeah, you can make your nostrils darker or lighter, but that's literally about it. I tend to go with like a medium nostril anyway, just so that sunlight enters through, because the problem that I have with this is if you take a flashlight and you just go right up your nose with it, you can see the light go through the skin. And the same thing would be if you're getting a light shining from here. You should technically be able to look up your nostril and see the light shining through. So you kind of want to do the same thing with the nostrils here. So they're not pitch black inside, but they're also not the color of the rest of the skin. Nostril width would just be the bottom part here where it kind of fans out and closed. Think of it as like where you would rub to get rid of a stuffy nose. And yeah, you can like really refine the nose, or you can really widen it. But again, this is kind of a matter of if it's not broken, don't fix it. Just don't fuck with it, essentially. Nostril size. I hate this one. Like, I get it. Nostril size is a thing. But you're kind of better off not fucking with that one either. Nostril slant. This one actually would be important. This one is. Because that's just the tip of your nose and kind of how that affects the overall look. So if you want like a hook nose or a beak nose, I mean, power to you. Not my forte. Or not my jam, or whatever you want to call it. Now from the side, I feel like her chin, now that I look at it, is just a little bit too far. Is it this one? No. There we go, that looks a little better. Just something from the sides, that way I don't have so much of a steep angle, if that makes sense. Gonna toy around with this just a little bit more. Yeah, something like that's fine. Getting back to the nose ridge. This is kind of a... it's a weird one. Nose height. It basically just changes the up to down portion of the tip of the nose by rotating this way. So if you want to like have like a gonzo nose, it basically kind of elongates the bridge to the, so that way it tips your nose tip down. I don't tend to kind of mess with that one either. It's really not the best way to do it. It's kind of like the same thing, a nose slant. Like, yeah, it's great that it exists, but the only thing it really changes is just the tip. The ones that you really want to kind of look at is the nose ridge depth. The nose ridge length, which I tend to keep in the middle anyway, because she's got a decent looking nose already. And the nose position. Those are the three main ones that are going to affect the look of your character. And kind of the general rule of thumb with character creation as well is the size of your forehead to your eyebrows should be the same size as eyebrows to your middle of your mouth, which should be roughly the same size as your chin when you have an open mouth. So it's like 1, 2, 3. So you kind of want to go with the rule of thirds on a character side of things. Again, though, she actually doesn't look too bad for what I've been doing so far, so we'll keep that as is. Eyes, again, if you're fine as they are, just keep it in the middle. I tend to give it a little bit more of a narrow look. Because again, this is kind of the thing where if you look dead on the front, you want to split it up into 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because when you draw a human face, realistically, that's the fifths. So you have your eye widths as your kind of basic starting point. Eye size, you kind of want to turn down just a little bit to make it line up with the rest of the face. I like having a slightly bigger eye. I hate the slant. The slant doesn't actually change the rotation of your eyes up or down. It takes the back parts of it and either crushes your eye or widens your eye. So if you see here, it just pushes the eye up in a really disturbing way. Honestly, it's nightmare fucking fuel. And then the eye position, you kind of want to adjust that accordingly, but again, with an average face, you just want to kind of keep it average anyway. brow ridge, I'm fine with it as is. Usually I just kind of like throw one or two just a little bit off center of what they normally are. That's honestly not going to be your big issue on this side of things. The forehead is where you're going to kind of want to make a couple of slight alterations. So when you look at her from the side, I actually kind of like where she looks already. But you're going to look at the forehead depth, and you have like the slight versus deep. When you edit that, it kind of creates a shelf here where you can kind of like jam your finger up and it would get caught, or jam your finger down and it would get caught. So you kind of want to keep that one as neutral as possible as well. Forehead protrusion, it's kind of similar, but it kind of flattens the forehead or just bulbs it out. Just because if you look, it just kind of like pushes that really forward, so it's just not right. It just ain't. So I try to keep that one as middle as possible, maybe just a little bit concave. Just so she doesn't have like a fully, like a round forehead, you know, if you know what I'm saying. Nose bridge height doesn't really matter too much, like you can't even see that much change when you do that, so I keep that as is. Honestly, I'm kind of fine with it as is right now. Because, I mean, the nose bridge, you don't want to go too high or low with it, because it's... I mean, it's a hit and a miss. It depends on what you want your eyebrows to do, because this kind of takes this part here underneath the eyebrow, and it makes her look more brazen if it's maxed. And if you add more depth, she kind of looks more angry and, I guess, emo. So I usually kind of keep that in the middle, or at least a little bit more toward the emo side if you want to, but otherwise just keep it average. It's kind of the same with this. It fucks with your eyes, so if you're happy with your eyes, leave it as is. Don't even bother with anything else. Nose bridge width. Honestly, I'm happy with this as is. I'm not even going to bother with the nose bridge width. And we didn't even get to this. We didn't even have to look at the facial balance, and she still looks decent. But I mean, if you want to, you can kind of... It says nose size, but yeah. At this point, you should be happy with your nose size, so you don't even need to mess with that. It's kind of the same with the nose to forehead ratio. There's not really that much that it does, except for change a little bit out here. It kind of expands the eyebrows just a little bit, but honestly, you can kind of leave that as is. Face protrusion, kind of go back to the side view for that. That kind of... It changes the jaw just a little bit, but if you go too protruded, too concave with it, it does the whole that nightmare fuel thing. Honestly, I'll keep that as is. Vertical facial spacing doesn't really do a whole lot either. It literally does the same thing as nose size does. It basically, instead of taking the nose and extending it, it takes the whole thing and kind of just a little bit. So you can see it kind of pushes the upper lip up and the eyebrows down. Or puts the eyebrows down and the upper lip... Eyebrows up and the lower lip down. Blech. So honestly, you really don't need to worry about a lot of this. Facial feature slant. It doesn't really do much. It really doesn't. And then if you want to widen all of your features or narrow them all, it doesn't look right. It really doesn't. Honestly, I'm fine with that as is. So when you get to the skin color, though, the thing with the base skin color in this game is you have like your regular, like kind of, regular, I use the term loosely, your Caucasian skin tone. So like you're in the sun a little too long and you get paler as you go right. Second row, you kind of get into like, this corner here is like stereotypically Asian skin tones, like, I don't know, like, there's like really pale, like I know sometimes they use like skin bleaching products. That would be kind of like this overall look, kind of similar to that. I guess I haven't seen the light of day is probably the best way to word it. And as you get down even further, you get to like purple skin tones for some reason, and like really, really unnaturally blues, and this one's a little bit more green. Honestly, I just kind of keep with, I guess, a basic one. Usually kind of... This is the healthiest looking one to me. And as you look at your skin color as well, you're going to notice that there's like these sliders that go from like orange to blue, purple to yellow. This one here, you want to maximize this. The skin color layer 2, you absolutely need to maximize this unless you want to have like a character that looks drowned. Because as soon as you fuck with that, she looks like a grape. Like, she does not look right at all. She looks like she's been suffocated, or like she stuck her head in a gas oven and kind of like went out with a bang that way. Well, not with a bang, but went out with like carbon monoxide. So you kind of want to maximize that, so that way she just doesn't have at all any washed out look. Usually I kind of take it 1 or 2 notches down just to give a little bit of extra depth to the color. And it's the same thing with skin color layer 1. If you maximize it to blue, it kind of washes out her character and she looks a little too pale. Whereas if you go way to the other side, she starts looking a little bit like Donald Trump. A little bit of orange to it. So you kind of want to keep it as nice as possible, but your best bet is to kind of stick somewhere between like 80 and like around there at 160. That's your safe zone. So I usually go with like 108 to 118 on. Maybe a little bit toward 98. Now the skin tone itself, though, that's just kind of how tan she is. You can darken it. You can lighten it. But again, when you get really light with it, it kind of screws up with the balance of things. And the Wizards of Waverly Place theme song pops into my head. Great. Skin color layer 3. This is it's a weird one. Like, if you go completely red with it, it's kind of fine. She looks like she's been in the sun just a little bit too long. Whereas if you go fully green with it, she just really looks washed out. Kind of like, there's like a scene in Lord of the Rings where Frodo is like, I think it was Frodo, leaning out over the water and seeing the reflection, trying to save himself from drowning. But it's kind of like the drowned look without the blue face. And that's kind of what you don't want. And you don't want to go too red with it either, unless you're kind of looking for a lobster character who looks like her skin's about to peel. But yeah, usually I kind of put that around like a 60 just to balance things out a little bit. It's not bad if you don't do it, but it just looks a lot more natural to have this kind of red tinge without going overboard. Now, the trick as well with these characters is you want to make the nose bridge, the cheek, and the laugh lines as similar as possible to the rest of her face. Because if you take a really dark laugh line, it really ages her as a character to the point where she looks like she's probably 20 years older than you want her to be. And if you kind of... like, if you go here, that looks pretty natural for me. Being in the middle or a little bit more toward the light side. But if you go a little too far with it, it just... like, what even is this? You know what I mean? Like, it's just way too white. And the laugh lines, as you can see, like, it's okay to have it a little bit darker if that's what you want. But you can see kind of like, even a little bit really adds a lot. So you kind of want to be minimal with the laugh lines as much as possible, without kind of going toward the whiter side of things. So usually kind of keep that neutral as possible, or slightly darker. Same thing with the cheek color. You can really wash her out, or you can make her look really sunburned. But honestly, it's just best to keep that somewhere neutral. I like to give her a little bit of blush, just so that way, instead of having like a pure white face, she's got like a little bit of color on there just to kind of offset how pale she actually is. And it's the same thing with the nose bridge. If you go really red with it, she kind of looks like a stereotypical drunk where they get the red nose and they're hiccuping a lot. Or she just looks frosty. So usually I kind of go a little bit on the red side just to provide that extra depth, if that makes sense. Maybe something like that. Yeah, like that. There we go. Now the eye area, again, you want to do the exact same thing here. You just kind of want to... You can toy around with the tones a little bit, but if you go too dark with it, as you can see here, it kind of creates this weird... not artifacting. But even like the lids of her eyes, when you look at that, it kind of screws with it. It makes like blood red. But we're going to fix that part of things as well when we get to the eyeliner. Eye sockets. This is going to be a weird one because there's... eye socket brightness and eye shadow are practically the same thing. The eye sockets, however, takes the entire area around your eye and brightens that. As you can see here, it's like realistic. It's really, really white or really, really dark to the point where she looks like she got punched in a bar fight. So you really don't want the eye socket brightness to be a little high either. You kind of want to keep it as neutral as you can get it. Same thing with the eyelid brightness. That's where you get the really dark vampire look versus the it doesn't match the face look. So you kind of want to keep that one as in the middle as possible as well. Eyelid color, that's where you're going to change the that redness that you saw like right there on the eye. And the trick is with this one is you kind of want to take that red that you're seeing on the cheeks, and if you want to have her look like she's wearing makeup, which technically she is wearing makeup for the sake of this because of the makeup section, this is the one that's going to give you the most kind of oomph behind your character. So I try to kind of put that up just a little bit, and it kind of works relatively well with those blue eyes right now. We'll come back to this when we look at eye color. Eyeliner, honestly, if you want to make it as dark as possible and go emo with it, power to you. I have no judgments on that. Just don't make it like this. Kind of looks like the Spice Girls goodbye video when they're all frozen and they got the ice crystals around their eyes. It just ain't gonna look right. But honestly, I don't really go too overboard with the eyeliner. Maybe like 180 to 210, something like that. Eyeshadow. This is actually... for some reason, I thought that this was going to be the one that goes under the eyes. I guess maybe I just needed to learn makeup terminology a little better. But you can really flatten her face or add some depth to it depending on what you're looking for. I like to add just a little bit extra depth to that just to make sure her features kind of pop. So we'll go with that. And lipstick is kind of one of those things, like, I add just a little bit extra red on either side just to make sure it's... Oh wait, actually the dark blue is what made it darker here. Just to give her a little bit of extra redness, if that makes sense. And like you can powder blue it as well, so if you want to go like a more natural tone, power to you. Even the pinks are actually not too bad in this game. I actually like this color pink here. Just something to make the lips kind of stand out against the face. Hair, this is kind of entirely up to you. I mean, I kind of like my character as is right now, so I'm going to leave that there. But you can toy around with hair colors as much as you want. Like, you can crank it up, go to like 70 and 70, and make this like... Turn that down just a little. You can make this like rose hair, like from Final Fantasy 13. Which is actually looking pretty decent right now. But now that we're getting into the hair side of things, I kind of want to go over this. When it comes to hair color and eyebrow color, it's, you kind of want your eyebrows to be darker than your hair, but not like pitch black. Because if you notice, like, even with myself, if you can see, like, I got like this auburn colored hair, even my eyebrows are not pitch black. So it's not really the best idea to kind of do that. So what I would do typically is I would tone this down by like 4 or 5 notches. Tone this down by like 4 or 5 notches. Maybe 3 or 4 notches. And just toy around until it gets like... to the point where it looks obviously different. but it's actually not a different color. So it's like a less saturated or a less hue saturation value. It's a darker value of the same ratio of colors. Hopefully that makes sense. And I hate the eyebrows that are some of them. Like this one kind of hangs down over the eyes and makes it look sad all the time. That's just a unibrow. Some of them are decent. Like it's okay that you have small eyebrows, but it isn't natural. Your best natural eyebrows that you're going to find are the second row, number 1 and 3. So this one's kind of like a more serious look. This one's kind of more of a neutral look. No eyebrows just looks fucking terrible. And your top middle one is going to be the other best one. Usually I tend to stick with like this one, for example. She doesn't have a beard, so why bother? Eyelashes, oops, wrong one. You don't really see the eyelashes a lot unless you pick the bottom first one. Just because that way you can see it kind of curl up above her eyelid. That's going to give you the best overall look, if that makes sense. Eyelash color, you're fine to leave black. Eyelashes are typically black anyway. Anyone who has other than black eyelashes, I'd kind of be worried. So this actually doesn't look too bad, and we kind of got like the nice warm hair color with the cool eyes, and I really like that we've been able to do that with her. I always change those pupil sizes to large to make sure that's all done. Tattoo, we're going to just kind of quickly just toy around with that a little bit. It just looks a little off for some reason. Wish there was like a 0.5 rotate on this. And you can kind of change the freckles as well. You can kind of make them run down her face. I don't know why it stops at the neck. Not that I want to look at her any further down, but... And this kind of like... I wish you could have more freckles, not just a band. But I like the band across the thing as well. So this is kind of how I make my characters as in the overall face structure. We're also going to darken that tattoo just a little bit. Yeah, something like that. There we go. Maybe not, because like if you notice there, she's got a freckle like right in there, and that's kind of not something that people normally have. So we can kind of just nudge that down just a smidge. There we go. That's better. And if you want, you can add glasses. There's nothing wrong with that if you like that whole Taylor Swift glasses, or some John Lennon glasses, or some steampunk, or monocle, whatever floats your boat, go for it. I personally don't like using glasses on my characters. But now that we got that done, I'm going to save over what I did yesterday. And we're going to toy around with hair color. So, and eye color. So this is kind of the other thing when you want to make an aesthetically pleasing character. Now, when we go to the facial hair, again, you kind of want to do it uniformly. You want to make sure all the colors are done at the same time. Just so that we have a starting ratio for all of your other ones. So let's say we want to make a platinum blonde character. A platinum blonde, because that one you can just kind of whoop and whoop. I mean, yeah, if you want to make a platinum blonde character, great. But this is where it really pops and shows that the eyebrows really should not be the same color as the hair, if that makes sense. So go to the brow color and just kind of like 105. 105, that looks fucking terrible. Just something to offset the... I mean, gray eyebrows aren't that bad. Could be a lot worse. But on the other side of things, if you go pitch black with the eyebrows, it actually doesn't look that bad in this case. Because I think a lot of people end up kind of platinum blonde dyeing their hair anyway and they leave their eyebrows. So that's actually not too bad. But I would kind of just crank this up just a little bit just to make it not pure black. I'm actually quite okay with that color too. We'll save over that one. What's a good way to do this? Let's work on black hair, and we'll work on heterochromia next, because this is going to be an interesting lesson on this. So, let's just toy all the hair colors all the way down. And hey, if you want to look like Aqua from Kingdom Hearts, yeah, there's a good starting point. So, first step, give it a couple notches of black. That way you get black with like a little bit of brown-ish gray. That way you're not completely raven haired. Like, it's fine if you want to give yourself raven hair. But most people don't have jet black hair to begin with. They've got like this other kind of underlying shine, or these underlying, like, I guess, like the reflections of the environment should kind of come into effect as well. There's a part in Tomb Raider Underworld where if you go into like a certain cave, or no, it's Tomb Raider Definitive Edition. There's a part where like Lara goes in the cave, and instead of having brown hair, it's like pitch black, and it looked cartoony against the rest of it. That's kind of what happens if you like really pitch black your hair. It just doesn't look uniform with the rest of the 3D models. Now, when working on heterochromia, that's going to be the fun part. Because, like, yes, you can easily give her these like piercing blue eyes, which I actually kind of like. But say you want to work on heterochromia, and you want to give her one red eye and one blue eye. You'll understand here. Ooh, that's actually pretty good too. I like that color. But when you look at her eyes right now, it's kind of like, there's a Yu-Gi-Oh card, I forget what it's called, where it's got the angel and the devil. It just looks way too obvious that she's got a blue eye and a red eye. So what you want to do in case of heterochromia, or finding any eye color, for example, or even hair color, you don't want to saturate it with one hue. So if you were to crank this up to like, say 100 and 100. Actually, we'll put 100 and 160, just to make her... Maybe that's not the best idea. 80 and 80. So 255, 80, and 80. But predominantly, she's got a red eye. Then we move to the other one, and you put this up to 80 and 80. Maybe turn that down just a little bit as well, because that's a little too blue against the red. You kind of want to keep the same saturation as well. So for this one, the blue eye looks just a little bit brighter than the red eye. So you kind of want to bump it down in a way that one eye doesn't overpower the other. Kind of like that one. And part of doing that as well is if you have a right people color. Say we go with 205. That's probably a good way to do it. There. So in this one, it's all like, this is a kind of extreme example of heterochromia anyway. Usually you go with like a green and a blue, or a brown and green, something like that. If you take the powerful color, you saturate it with the two others, and then you take the opposite color and you saturate it with the two others, it's going to give you a much better look overall, because you're not overpowering the character with one specific hue. It's kind of similar, like you can do this with green eye as well. I don't know who would have a red eye and a green eye. Let's say you want to go with a really piercing green eye on this side, and you want to go with a piercing blue eye on the other. It just looks a lot better, aesthetically. If you've got the two piercing eyes, you kind of put the other colors in as well. So this looks kind of relatively normal. But as soon as you take the others out, that blue just becomes cartoony blue almost. So 80, and usually I could kind of tone it down a little bit, just to 280, 80. Even with this one, let's just put a 280, 80. There. So that doesn't look too bad. So we've got a heterochromia look going on for her, so that's not terrible. Some other colors that I find go really well together if you do want to make a character that, say you want to go with the blonde character rather than the white hair character. You do kind of want to tone down the blonde just a little bit with blue. Kind of something like that. Eye color... Honestly, I find green eyes look best with blonde hair. Oops, color pupils. Let's just crank that down. Even blue eyes is fine, but I find green is a lot better. I'm not saying anyone who has blue eyes and blonde hair is terrible looking or anything like that. It's just I find that the green looks a lot better. It's kind of like when somebody wears a blonde wig, wears a green shirt with blonde hair, or even a blue shirt with blonde hair. It just looks, it pops. Kind of looks like Daenerys Targaryen, just with freckles. But even still, this hair color is kind of saturated with red, so we're just going to tone that down a little bit. There, that's perfect right there. And then we'll change that pupil color just a little bit more. There, so that kind of pops a little bit as well. I'll save that in my old one. One other thing that you can do is kind of toy around with elements. And this is kind of more character design related rather than how to make a good looking character. This is probably the unnecessary part of the video. You're probably already playing the game by now. But let's say we want to have a character that's that really kind of pops in terms of how opposite her, like this is fine. This is kind of like a complementary green and yellow, like blue and green make yellow, so those kind of go side by side. But you can actually use the opposite colors on the wheel as well. So example here, let's go with the fire and ice scheme that I was working before. So if we were to give her a tinge of the ginge, some gingivitis going on. It's kind of hard to find that balance that really works. I mean, if you really want to go with... Like, it's not a realistic game anyway, but we'll toy around with this and see what happens. Eye color. Pupils. Color. So for example here, if you want to go with like fire and ice, that can work. We had to kind of toy around with the hair color just a little bit more on this, I think. Just so it's not as overpowering, I guess is the best way to word it. Oh, whoops, that's brow color. Yeah, something like that should be okay, relatively speaking. Maybe put a little bit of that green back in there as well. Just so it's not an unnaturally redhead. And then take the pupil color and I'm going to tone it down just a little bit on the blue side. Throw in a little bit of green. So something like this, you can kind of toy around with the whole fire and ice look. You can do the same thing with red hair and green eyes. You can do the same thing with like blonde hair, blue eyes, blonde hair, green eyes. Any color of hair with brown eyes can kind of work as well, depending on kind of who you ask. I'm actually okay with that look as well. I'm going to overwrite the other one I had. The one that I had the other day as well. I really... Yeah, you can kind of tell how much I've been trying to refine this method. They look really different with such small changes. And you can tell which ones I've edited because the head is a relatively normal size. So I need to go with the blue hair and the brown hair next, and then we'll kind of... And the aqua hair. So, back to the hair color. let's go with like a nice, similar color look. A complementary color, if you will. So you can make her like really have seaweed colored hair if you want to. Something that's like really, okay, maybe not so bright. Something like this. Actually, kind of a general rule of thumb as well is if you're going to go with a color where the hair is the same as the eyes, make your eyes a brighter color than your hair. Just because it just doesn't look right otherwise. And something like this is fine. But like for the pupils, if you have your eyes a darker color than the hair, she just kind of looks empty, like null, void, like she's got no soul or something like that. So just try to make your eyes like brighter if you can. Because you know the whole motto, like the eyes are the window to your soul. That's kind of what you want to aim for when you're doing this. I'm actually okay with that look. That's kind of like taking the blue and then a more saturated blue. That's a nice way that you can make your characters as well. Now, if you just want to kind of go natural with it, like some people do. Shit, where am I supposed to go? There we go. Fuck. We were looking at the brown hair look. So 70-40-40 mix will give you a nice little brown tone. Maybe just a little bit darker on the blue than the green. $60-30-20. That's a decent one. So that's okay. But if you wanted to change the pupils... So remember I said 70-40-30 or 70-30-20 was the other one? It kind of looks flat because her eyes and hair are the exact same color, which never happens. So you kind of want to darken her eyes. And I was telling you earlier as well, like the whole facial structure can really screw with the perception of the character. So if we go back to the face shape and we kind of look at the eyes itself, you can... Oh, it wasn't that one, sorry, it was the cheekbones. Cheekbone, 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 where you at? Cheekbone, nose ridge. Cheeks, cheekbone height. Because you can really make her eyes look bigger, kind of like doe eyes. And that changes the whole look of the character on that side. And then... what else can we do with her? So we gave her doe eyes. Ooh, I know what we can do. We're going to save this, and we're going to go back to that aqua color character. So aqua. And then... we're going to change the makeup a little bit. So this is the whole underwater look that we're going for. Remember I told you earlier you can kind of screw with it and make her more powdery and more whatever? You can really mess with the character's appearance just by using the makeup to kind of match the overall color scheme that you're looking at as well. Like this kind of looks washed out, like she's kind of like an underwater mermaid or something like that. And I mean, it's entirely up to you if you wanted to do it that way. I just kind of thought of that as an afterthought. I like it as is right now. The other one that I meant to do was Aqua from Kingdom Hearts, just because that's my favorite one, but... not my favorite one, but... this one's my favorite one right here. Between this and... the blonde... actually, all of them are pretty good, except I don't like the heterochromia look. Just because the whole two-eye color thing just kind of freaks me out. Maybe it's just me. The other thing you can do, if you really feel like it, hair color, is you can get really unnatural with the hair colors and eye colors and really fuck with everything. So if you crank this all the way up, that gives you the whole white look. Oh, that actually looks good with heterochromia. But say you want to go with like purple hair. Like, you can make the neon colors if you want. I advise against it, though. The best kind of thing is to kind of... if you're going to exaggerate a non-natural color, strip one hue out entirely, and balance the other two in lower amounts. So this is actually like a decent purple. The lower you get with it, though, the closer it is to black, which is kind of more what you would expect from a hair dye anyway. So that's if you're going with unnatural hair colors, whereas like you can kind of offset with a little bit extra on the other ones. So if we were to save that one, that's fine. But if we were to load that blonde one, you're going to see when I look at the hair colors. I really cranked up the red, put like a higher medium green and then a lower blue to offset, just to kind of put a little bit more balance to it. So unnatural hair colors, you want to strip out a color entirely. Natural ones, you want to add a little bit of each, if that makes sense. But, I mean, that being said, this is... I'm probably gonna... That really does make a difference. You don't notice it first, but damn. I'm probably going to play as this character, the pink-haired one. And when I do play through the game, I want to see kind of how far I can get without dying, if it's even possible. I just kind of want to toy around and see what to expect, essentially. There is going to be a text guide coming up with all of these, kind of what the sliders do and what they actually, what to expect from them. That's going to be coming up shortly after this video gets posted as well. But for now, though, I'm just going to kind of cut it off here, and we're just going to... Actually, we're going to load the character first. Oh, fuck, fine. What should I name my character? Pink hair. Let's call her Claire. Or no. Let's go. Let's just be really, really nerdy with it and call her Lightning. Lightning. Lightning G. So the reason I'm doing it this way, by the way, is so that I can save all my presets. Because if you go in, make all your presets and save it as favorites, and then just quit out of the game entirely, apparently it deletes all of your favorites. At least I've noticed that happened to me the other day. So that was fun. But I hope you guys are getting something out of this video, because I know a lot of people have had troubles with making a character that doesn't look like shit. Some people posted theirs and they kind of look like Igor or the Hunchback of Notre Dame or whatever you want to call it. Good. I'm just going to skip this and we're going to exit out of this entirely because we're doing this on the next one. Or the next session. So anyway, that being said, I hope you guys found something of not entertainment value, but something of educational value when it comes to this whole thing. Because I know character creation can be a little bit hard. It's not as easy as in The Sims, where you can just take a muscle and just, kind of shrink and expand it. But yeah, the Soul series, they don't do anything completely different with the sliders. It's just they kind of name things in a weird way, where like depth is actually the bulbousness of it, or thickness of the jaw is actually the concave and convex of this part here. There's a lot of misnomers around it, and I feel like once you kind of start off with an average and work from there, that'll give you a better starting point, especially when you know what each area of the face actually does. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interested to see what you guys do. If you guys have any like IMGURL, imgirl links, or whatever they're called, I would love to see you guys' sliders as well, see what you create. And if you guys have any tips on character creation as well, feel free to drop it in the comment box down below, because I'm always looking for new tips for character creation. Especially where I'm the person who spends about 7 fucking hours creating Sims families. But that being said, I'm going to kind of wrap it up here for now. And until we get into the actual playthrough, until next time, as always, Laguna Matata and happy gaming out there. Cheers.